angry Americans, inspired Americans, all Americans, welcome back to the Manhattan Classic Car Club for an interview I am really, really excited about. The great Scott Campbell is in the house.
Oh, man, the great.
You are great, man.
Hang on, let me get my dad on the line so he can hear this.
We could do that. I don't know if I have the technology to do that, but we'll try. But, dude, many reasons I've been excited to talk to you. But as I was telling the crew before you got here, you and I are kind of this next generation situation where we've kind of been friends over text for going on a couple years now, but never actually met in person until today.
Yeah. No, I've always respected you and admired you. I consider us close. I consider us friends, even though the handshake didn't happen until today.
Right. Yeah. Which is like a sign of our times, right? But we have a lot of friends in common, and I've been respecting and admiring your work for a long time as well. And go ahead, please.
No. Yeah. It's, likewise. Yeah. It's, I've always, I've been seeing what you do for afar, especially for veterans and first servicemen and for a long time trying to figure out a way to help support that cause. So, yeah.
I want to get into that. And one thing I always ask folks is what they want to drink. And we're recording this late morning, so you're sticking with water. But you said something else, which was interesting and I think reflective of the work that you do. You don't drink coffee, or you can't drink coffee because
caffeine.
It messes with your hands.
And, I get jittery, and then those lines start to wiggle, and then my whole career takes a dive. I gotta keep a steady hand.
Or it could be a whole nother line from you, right? Of only when you're doing coffee.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, it's I don't know. Yeah, I haven't done caffeine in so many years that now when I do have it, I mean, like on road trips, if I need to stay awake, I'll have 3 sips of gas station coffee, and it's basically like doing meth. I'm so sensitive to it.
I hear you. That's why I drink so much of it. Yeah. You're back in New York, and you moved to LA.
Yeah.
Right. But how's it feel to be back in New York, man? Because you built a business here. This was home for you for over a decade.
Yeah.
How's it feel coming back?
It's great. I mean, I come back to New York. Honestly, like within an hour of landing here, I texted my wife and I was like, man, Nova's going to love this place. My daughter's name is Nova. I was like, she's going to love this place because she's just like, my daughter is built for New York. She just, the way her brain works, the level of stimulus she requires, like her like sharpness and wit. Like, yeah, I was like, I can't wait to unleash her on this town. But I'm excited to come back. Once the kids are old enough to like ride the subway and stuff, like we'll have our stint with New York again.
And our kids are almost the same age. Your kids are 4 and 2. Mine are 4 and 6 months. And testament to how I was a little scattered this morning. I accidentally texted you a video of my kid that I was supposed to send to my wife as she was getting on a plane, which is not a big deal because you get it, right?
Oh, like totally. You're deep in
great.
Let's do kid photos.
You're deep in little kid world like I am, right?
Let's do it. Yeah, no, my life is shockingly domestic. It is.
But it's also, I don't know about you, but it's also, for me, just the absolute best thing ever.
It's the best pain in the ass ever. Yeah, like all the cliches are true. It's really, higher highs, lower lows, but I'm thrilled to be on the roller coaster.
Yeah, and my friend Willie Geist, who was our first ever guest, gave me a really, really great insight. He just said, it just keeps getting better.
Yeah.
And when he said it at the time, I hadn't even had my first son yet, but it really, for me, is true. Every time I'm like, this age is so awesome, it evolves into another level. Well, right?
Your kid's born and you're like, oh my God, I love this thing. But really, you don't know each other. You're just legally obligated to keep this thing alive. You're just like, wow, I guess it's beautiful. I think so. But then, 4 years down the line, that little larva is like coming home and like telling you jokes that truly bring tears to your eyes. And that's when it's like, I fucking love this person.
Is your daughter in the joke thing? My son is into the joke thing right now.
Yeah, she tells knock-knock jokes that are the worst knock-knock jokes you've
ever
heard.
Absolutely terrible.
But I dying laugh. It's the best thing I've ever heard.
And there's a guy in the Planes movie that always says, like, I swish my tail at you. And he says, joke? You make joke? And that's become actually the funniest thing my son does is he tries to do his portrayal of the chupacabra, the guy who flies around the planes when he says, you make joke? You make joke?
Yeah.
So we sound like, two weirdos running around New York City with a bad Mexican accent.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they're still figuring out the structure of jokes. Although my son, who's 2, I'm so impressed at how advanced his sense of humor is. Cause he he'll fart and I'll be like, Ozzy, what was that? And he'll be like, dada fart. So he already knows
He's already giving you shit.
that it's funny to blame your farts on someone else. I was like, that's pretty good. That's pretty
deep.
advanced.
That's deep. But your kids are growing up around two amazingly talented artists. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is I wanted the show to be about going deep with folks who are inspiring, important, iconic Americans. And I think you have really come to define and kind of redefine, this industry of tattoo, but so much more now. And when we were, downstairs chopping it up a little bit, we started to get into that. But one thing I wanted to go specific on is I didn't know until we were texting that you've actually gone all the way to Afghanistan. And we were going back and forth. And he said, "Oh, you're a PJ." And I said, "Yeah, I'm a PJ, but Paul Joseph, not parajumper."
Yeah.
Because you actually had been with PJs in Afghanistan.
I spent a bit of time in Afghanistan with Squadron 212, a group of PJs that were at Bagram at the time, and really was like a pivotal life experience. I mean, God, I could talk for hours just on that, because I grew up in a hippie family in Louisiana. You know what I mean? Like, nobody would like I never understood why people would go to war or why people would enlist. I had an uncle who was a Navy SEAL during the Vietnam, and he was fucked up from it for my whole childhood. I just remember he was like a severe alcoholic and like had really, had like rage issues, and and everybody was like, oh, it's like, kind of like alluded to this like big thing he went through, but I never knew it. Like, I never really understood, what it meant to be in the military. And then, here I found myself some artsy fartsy little Brooklyn hipster kid, landing in like full body armor at Bagram Air Force Base, and all of a sudden being like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, I don't even know why we're in Afghanistan. I don't know why did I think this was a good idea? And a
lot of soldiers probably wondering the same shit.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I was like in the gym, just like, hey guys. And they're like, what the fuck is this? But I went there because, I've been tattooing for 20 years. And when I started tattooing, it was very much like a underground, kind of fringe culture that was, it felt very like special and insular. And I was really part of this like family. And then I saw it explode into, reality shows and mall culture and, fashion runways, which like I'm partly to blame for, you know what I mean? Like I've done a lot of fashion stuff with, Louis Vuitton handbags and design, but I kind of, here was this thing that I loved, and I couldn't get angry at the world for loving it also, but I really wanted to get back to tattooing that had true emotional value, that I really felt like I was connecting with people in a way that was useful to them. And I had done a few projects where I would go and tattoo in prisons. I spent, a few months in a prison in Mexico City, working with inmates there and tattooing them. And a buddy of mine and I were like, what if I went to go tattoo people in the front lines of a war? I just emotionally want to know what's valuable to them. Like what symbols, what language, what's going through their head in a way, like what can I document on them that will help, give them something. And 8 days after saying that out loud, we were in Afghanistan.
Really?
And and so we wandered around. They didn't know, like the press officer who was basically like our chaperone, making sure we didn't see anything we weren't supposed to see or touch anything we weren't supposed to touch. I had no idea what to do with me. They were just like, I don't know. There's some baggage handlers with tattoos. You want to go talk to the baggage handlers? And we're like, okay. And then we were driving around and I saw these guys. I was like, who are those guys? What do they do? Because they just like felt different. I was like, there's some magic juju around those guys. Who's that? Yeah. And they're like, oh, those are the PJs. And I was like, what's a PJ? Tell me about this. And they're like, well, we'll go meet them. And they pulled onto into the PJ barracks. And I mean, this is some crazy like synchronicity stuff, but basically the moment I pulled up, this 6.5 foot guy, is walking across the tarmac, And he literally just walked off set from some like Good Morning America interview that they wanted him to do. And he was just like, fuck you people. Like, I can't. They had just hours before come off, I don't know if you, Operation Bulldog Bite, which is one of like the gnarliest firefights to go down in our Afghanistan occupation. And so the PJs, you know, were the team that went in and was just grabbing everybody they could, you know, like dead or alive, like getting everybody out of there and patching them up and bringing them back. And I mean, Roger was still, you know, covered in blood and guts. And he walked up to me and I just saw the gravity of his experience. Like you could just see in his eyes that he was in the spirit world. You know, he was somewhere else, you know, and he looked at me and he looked at, you know, the officer that was escorting us and he was like, what is this? Who are you? And my heart just like sank into my feet. I was just like, I have no business being here. I'm so sorry. Like I'm a stupid tattoo artist from Brooklyn. I'm sorry for even breathing the same air as you. And he kind of looked at me and he's like, you're a tattooer? I was like, yes, sir. I do tattoos. And he's like, yeah, that might be good. And he looked at our like handler and he was like, go pack up their stuff. He's coming with me. And he literally like brought me into the PJ barracks hours after, you know, everything went down with Bulldog Bite. And I just like, I didn't leave that building for a week. I didn't come out for air. I just tattooed those guys 24 hours a day, drinking energy drinks and eating granola bars and just like contributing emotionally whatever I could to them, you know, reconnecting with life, you know, after everything they had been through. I mean, there was, you know, this guy, Jimmy Settle, who, you know, I still talk to all the time. You know, I remember him like walking up with a Band-Aid on his forehead. And, you know, I was like, oh, what happened? He's like, oh, I just popped a pimple and it bled a little bit. And then he walked away and it was like, no, they pulled bullet fragments out of his head this morning. And I was like, okay, cool. You know, so this is like the reality that I'm brushing up against. And, yeah, it was really amazing.
And it was, I'm sure, important to them.
I tried. I am so humbled.
I can tell you it was. I mean, because, you know, those moments of release or, you know, of home or even reflection really, really do matter. And the PJs are, you know, the special operations in the Air Force, the most elite, right? They're almost like the samurai. You said that you kind of had that look in his eye, right? But what they do is so elite and so unique. It's like, you know, more elite than NFL quarterback status or something like that, right? There's so few of them. But what they do is so intense and so important and so high stakes that for them to have welcomed you into that was I'm sure very significant to them as as to you.
I felt like the reverence around those guys.
What'd they get? I mean, you get this question a lot, but like, you know, was there a theme among the PJs, or are they getting like Mickey Mouse tattoos? Like, what?
To be honest, no. It was two directions. You know, a couple of them, you know, like Raj got, you know, the coordinates of what he had just experienced on his arm, and then I did two birds on him with his son's names, and everyone else I tattooed, the tattoos went in those two directions. It was either reinforcing the sense of camaraderie with the people they were there with, or it was reinforcing the connection with a home they needed to not forget.
That's another reason I was excited to talk to you, Scott, because I know that the world of tattoo has, I think, a special significance among a lot of folks in our audience, the vets, first responders, you know, cops, firefighters, EMTs, you know, and often they signify loss, right? And they want to, or they want to celebrate life, right? And so many guys and gals that I know will have the names of friends they've lost or moments in that military experience that they want to stay with them. Yeah. And I think, you know, almost more than any other community, it has a real importance, especially because on the other side of things, it's a way of kind of bringing it with you. When you want to bring your family overseas and you've got that tat of your kid's name, it's that feeling that they're with you in that terrible moment when you're a PJ in a firefight. Yeah. And so you have a really unique insight into that community and probably into so many different communities.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, even, you know, thinking about firefighters, it was like, yeah, like, you know, I lived in New York. during 9/11, I was living down off of Canal Street, and I was tattooing in a tattoo shop out in Long Island, in Wantagh, Long Island, which is like half the cops and firemen live out there. So I did tons of 9/11 memorial tattoos that year. But people get tattooed. I think people are really drawn to tattoos at moments in their life when they have big things happening that are out of their control. Be it someone dying, be it heartbreak, be it the shit that, those guys went through in Afghanistan. I think it's, when you're kind of being affected by circumstances, getting a tattoo can be a very literal and physical way of reassuring yourself that you're the one guiding your own life. Like you could say like, fuck, like I'm just riding this crazy world wave of circumstances that are out of my control. But you can go to a tattoo shop and be like, but you know what? I'm going to make a decision right now that will change who I am in a symbolic way for the rest of my life. Like I'm going to just like carve something into my skin, and for the rest of my life, I will have that thing. So I think it really helps people feel more in control of who they are and where they're going.
Has it changed at all, Scott, now that maybe tattoos aren't as permanent as they used to be? Now with, if you can get it lasered off, does that change the way people approach it or the way you approach it?
I don't know if you've gotten anything lasered off, but it's a brutal process. Yeah. It's still not like flipping a switch. It's not as simple as an eraser. It's still, if you go to get a tattoo lasered off, it takes, 5 to 10 really painful sessions, and you can't help but meditate about whatever the fuck that tattoo is while you're doing it. So it almost, sometimes I feel like getting a tattoo removed gives that tattoo more power, because it's like you have to go through this ritual again and again and again around that one tattoo. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like obviously it's easy for me to say because I'm covered in, I'm like the bathroom wall of some shitty bar with like names and phone numbers scribbled all over me. Like my skin is not precious. But you're kind of, I got to check it. I mean, you're more like, the bathroom at CBGB's. I mean, this is not a shitty bar. With all due respect. It's a lot. But there's, I'm on like my 3rd and 4th layer now. But I do kind of think, it's like when I see people, people come in the tattoo shop all the time. They're just like, oh, I fucking hate this tattoo. Like, I can't stand it. I really just like regret it. And, like I've heard this speech thousands of times, and in reading beneath the surface, I feel like when someone really hates a tattoo, it's because they don't like who they were at the time that they got the tattoo, and they want to pretend that version of them never existed. And so I don't know if there is such thing as regrettable. There's going to be people who don't like this, but I don't think there's such a thing as regrettable tattoos. I think a regrettable tattoo just represents an unreconciled past.
Wow. Have you ever said no
to doing tattoos?
To a tattoo concept?
So many times.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What's that like? how does that go down?
Well, now I have the luxury of, I have
You're very elite status now.
Yeah. Like I've reached a place in my career where I can say no, and there's still someone behind them that will say, yeah, Like I can still feed my family and say no to tattoos that I disagree with. But, there have been times in my life when I needed that $100, in order to eat. And so when someone came in with a shitty idea, it's like with any artistic endeavor, I had this like scale of like integrity versus hunger, and like which side do I go with? But you get really good, when someone comes in with a horrible idea, you really get really good at this bedside manner of leading them towards a better idea in a way that they think it's their idea. Where you're like, okay, we're going to go over here, and you're going to think you thought of it.
Is there a Scott Campbell line at that point of impact? Is there are you sure you want to do this? Or do you have a line like some doctors do
this might be too
right before you start to cut?
But I have basically, I'll draw something the way I want to do it or the way I think. I'm not a dick. Like I try to acknowledge whatever their emotional situation is that brought them there. I want it to represent that. But if the execution, if their idea of if I think, what they're envisioning is kind of crappy, I've fully drawn it the way I want to do. And then in showing to them, be like, hey, so you said something that was really awesome, and it made me think of this, and I thought that was such a great idea that you had, and so this is what I drew based on your idea.
Yeah.
They didn't say anything that made me think about that. I just drew it my way. I was like, yeah, but like that one thing you said really made it click, and so I thought that was great, the thing that you suggested, so I drew the thing that you suggested. And, it's also kind of them saving face of being like, oh, yeah, that does look better than my idea, but let's call it my idea and just put it on me.
Right.
And,
right. But there's a real, psychological and artistic mastery to what you do. And that experience of going from PJs in Afghanistan to, guys in prison in Mexico City to Hollywood movie stars. I mean, you are maybe more than almost anybody I've interviewed, somebody who's gone uptown, downtown, everywhere in between, of right?
Yeah.
And so
I've tattooed everything from like people who murdered for biker gangs that I can't name to Jennifer Anniston and everything in between. I can't think of another blue collar job that touches all that. Yeah.
And so going back to the point you made earlier, you've been around tattooing as it has exploded around the world. It's almost like, I don't know, you're like KRS-One in hip hop's explosion, or, I don't know who the artist we want to pick is, but you have been kind of a founding father as this expression and this, I don't even know how to encapsulate this movement has swept the globe. So as that has happened, and specifically in this country, given your roots, right? You came from Louisiana. What have you learned about America?
College isn't as important as they make it out to be. That was kind of like, it's really, emotional value is actual value. If I had to summarize it up, it's that, you know what I mean? Like you think that like commodities are value and, hard goods are value, like real estate is value, but emotional value is true value. Like people will pay for emotional value. And I've based my career on that. I mean, there was one thing that really, I can bitch about college and it's useless if we want to, but like there was one experience that really kind of made me click early on in my career as to the value of what I do. And, I started tattooing in this shitty biker shop in San Francisco called Picture Machine. And, I was low guy at the totem pole, so I had to open up each day and kind of clean up after the whole mess that all the guys left the night before. And one morning I was there, I got in there at 11, I was opening up, and it was set up like a doctor's office where there's a waiting room and then the tattoo area and a little sliding window in between. So I went in there, turning all the lights. I'm cleaning up all the Chinese food off the stations that the guys left the night before. And, I hear footsteps coming in and I hear them walk into the waiting room and I turn around and there's guys standing there. And I was like, hey, buddy, what can I do for you? Can I help you? And he was like, I want to get a butterfly tattoo. I was like, all right. So I grabbed the butterfly binder, put it on the counter. I'm like, thumb through there, pick out one you like, let me know. And he didn't even reach for the book. He was like, you pick it. He's like, I'm sure whichever butterfly you pick, I'll be happy with. And I was like, are you sure you don't want to? And then I realized he was blind. And, long story short, I start tattooing this guy. I pick out a butterfly, put a stencil on his chest, and I start tattooing him. And so I'm like, what's going on? Like, you got to tell me the story here. And here's a guy who has been blind his whole life. He was born without vision. So he's never seen a butterfly. And he's never seen a tattoo. But he's getting a tattoo of a butterfly on his chest. He's going through this ritual. And it, he went on to say, he reads a lot in Braille and he read, he read the story of Papillon, the guy had a tattoo of a butterfly on his chest. And he didn't even know what a tattoo was or a butterfly, but he wanted to have that thing. And it just made me realize how powerful symbols can be to people. Whereas he didn't need to see it or really understand it, but he connected with that symbol so much, it was still worth going through that for him to get. And that gave me a real reverence for what I was giving to people and made me really understand how valuable that can be to people.
Wow. That's an incredible story.
It was amazing. Yeah. And he went on to get more tattoos. He got a dragon and a tiger and a bunch of all the cliches. He did it.
Yeah.
But But yeah, he was a really
Thank
amazing
you for
guy.
sharing that. That's a really, really incredible
But it
story.
made me take what I do much more seriously.
Yeah.
Because like, oh, this isn't just flippant aesthetic. You know, like
Right.
there's an underlying meaning to it. But yeah, so in, you know, like in relation to like what I've learned about America, it's that, yeah, emotional value and emotional currency is really powerful. You know, I mean, it's, you know, if we're going into it, you know, I mean, the show is called The Angry Americans. If we want to brush against our shitbag president, you know, he's president because of his emotional resonance. Like nothing, you know, he's totally impractical. He's a fucking moron, but people feel angry and he connects with that anger. And that's where all his power is derived from, you know, is he just emotionally connects with people. And it's like, fuck, you know, like facts don't even matter. He's distorting reality with emotion. And yeah, so it's like, you know, it's terrifying in a way to see it like that emotional power abused at that level. But yeah, I try to use it for the forces of good.
I'm glad you took us there, because, you know, another reason I was excited to talk to you, Scott, is because your life and your journey has taken you into so many different places, right? You know, you have this gritty background of scraping, you know, tattooing to eat,
Yeah.
right? And then, you know, soaring all the way up to tattooing Jennifer Anniston, starting multiple businesses. You are politically active. You're thinking, you know, you're conscious. You and your wife are involved in what's going on, you know, in the world. And so building on that point you raised, the question I ask of everyone, Scott Campbell, what makes you angry?
Oh man. I mean, this year a lot. It's like how long is this podcast?
As long as it needs to be, man. That's the great part about podcasts.
No, I think the stuff that really makes me angry is when people capitalize or take advantage of other people's kindness, you know, and I you know, the notion that it's funny, like the lottery used to make me angry when I was a kid, because it was like I read there was some punk rock record label, I think it was Dead Kennedys or something, that called the lottery a tax on hope. And I was just like, oh yeah, fuck that. Like you're really like, because optimism as a whole is something that I want to believe is growing. You know what I mean? Like optimism is like what I need in order to look my kids in the eye every morning. And the fact, the notion that there are forces and greedy fucking, you know, institutions that literally base their business model on exploiting people's optimism and their hope and their kindness, really, really infuriates me, you know? And I think, you know, this administration and like a lot of things going on in DC and in the world, you know, like it's easy to shit on our country because we're fucking up more than anybody, but you know, there's like huge right-wing movements in Germany right now, you know, and like there's like a kind of global issue going on, but the notion that there is a group of people who still really believe in compassion and in a community and helping each other, and that those emotional values are exploited and taken advantage of by people who just see everything as dollar signs, is really infuriating.
I feel you on that, man.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad you shared that. We were talking earlier about, you know, your connection to punk rock culture.
Yeah.
I mentioned to you that I've been honored to know Henry Rollins, who, you know, spoiler alert, folks, he'll join us at some point in the next couple of weeks or months, and we'll go deep on that. But, you know, you've had these influences from your upbringing. Punk rock is one of them. You grew up in Louisiana. Now you're living in New York and LA and hanging out like Louis Vuitton and all this,
Yeah.
you know, other levels. But going back to where you came from, because you're such a great American success story. Like you've built businesses, you've created so many things that have contributed positively to people's lives and to our country and to our world. But going in the way back machine, you started to tell me the story downstairs, but I'm excited for you to share it with the audience. Scott Campbell, what was your first car?
My first car was a real ratty Chevy Nova. It was a 67 Nova. It was actually more like Fred Flintstone's car, because the passenger floorboard was actually totally rusted out and had a 2x4 bolted across that the passenger had to put their foot on, but you could watch the pavement go by underneath you. Yeah. I mean, that car, I mean, we were, this is going to sound really hypocritical. It's like I'm just talking about compassion, but we were like little redneck assholes. Like I remember taking that car when like airbags first came out. We were like, what? I remember taking that car and like we went to the nearest mall. We were like, let's find the most expensive car we can and ram it and see if we can make the airbags go off. We were just like, now I was, like a shitty little suburban, teenager, but I learned compassion later on, people.
Yes.
Don't judge too harshly.
What color was the car, Scott?
It was just like a tan, like sandy, dusty, like rust color. It didn't last that long, but it served its purpose. It gave me the freedom that you needed, when you're 16. Like any car, anything that can like, anything that's better than hitchhiking is great, and but that now my daughter, who's 4 years old, is named Nova, which I really, is great because Nova obviously has, astronomy references, but it also has like red-blooded redneck American, value as well. And
I love that. I've never met anyone named Nova, and I've never interviewed anybody who named their firstborn child after their first car.
Yeah, I mean it's I wanted to name. We have a 2-year-old son too. I wanted to name him Truck, but Lake wouldn't let me. I was like, come on, Truck would be such a great name.
I was going for Maximus and Thor and a couple others that got rejected, but you landed on another cool one.
Yeah, Ozzy.
You landed on Ozzy.
Osgood for short.
What's harder, coming up with a tattoo for yourself or for a loved one, or coming up with a name for your kids? That's kind of
they're both yeah. I mean, tattooing
maybe the ultimate creative experience, right?
But I mean, it is kind of like in the same way that I look in the mirror and I actually don't even see my tattoos anymore. It's like the person will change what that tattoo means. In the beginning, you put all this pressure on a name or what the connotations are, but like, 1 year, 2 years into it, the sound of that name is so abstract and so connected with who that person is that like it doesn't matter. Like you could name him Orange Juice and you'd still fucking love him.
Yeah. And they grow into it, right?
Yeah,
and
totally.
they define it.
Dude, my kids would make the word orange juice look dope.
Yeah,
they would,
right. Yeah,
they would
I mean, when my firstborn son's name is Ryder, and he is a writer. I can't imagine the name without him or him without that name.
Nova,
right? And it just has come to define who he is, or he has come to define what it means in the world. And there's only one of him, and he's a beautiful and unique snowflake, right?
Yeah.
That tells fart jokes and bad knock jokes. But when you've had this amazing journey, Scott, where you've gone through so many different industries, and you're also an entrepreneur. You've been the guy sweeping the floors at night when the blind guy comes in to get a tattoo, and then you've worked with Louis Vuitton. And now, another reason I've been really looking forward to talking to you is you're running and creating a company that I think is brilliant. You created Beboe, and I know your business partner, Clement, that's one of the ways we first connected. He's, I think, a visionary and genius and brilliant guy that I've been thrilled to know. And a couple of years ago, he put the product in my hand and told me what he was doing, and I was blown away. And I think what you're doing is really, really exciting. But can you tell the story of Beboe and what you guys are doing?
So yeah, for those who know, Beboe is a cannabis brand. We do like cannabis oil, vape pens, and edibles. Currently in California and Colorado, and then launching to other states soon. Yeah, I mean it's funny. When I first started getting into cannabis, I was like, "Ooh, this is going to be a jump. I don't know if people are going to follow." But like, I was like, "Wow, this is out of my wheelhouse." But like, fuck it. Like, I'm passionate about it. I want to do it. But now being on the other side of it, like I said, like I kind of saw and participated in growing tattooing from this underground fringe, basically criminal culture, to the center of pop culture, and now being with weed where it is now, it's like, oh, it's the same thing. It's taking this underground criminal fringe culture that I was super passionate about and translating that to America. And so there's actually been a lot more parallels than I thought when I took those first steps. But basically, in you know, in tattooing, I found myself I found myself culturally relevant, but broke, you know? And so I'm like, wait, like here's, you know, I'm very Googleable, you know what I mean? Like I'm out there, but I'm still like, my life is very hand to mouth, you know? So I was like, how can I be this? Like, how can all these powerful, rich, creative people look to me for creative, like guidance, you know? And the most intimate, one of the more intimate, like things that they'll purchase or do. But at the same time, like I don't like, you know, the work that I do doesn't resonate beyond these people's arms or legs, you know, and there's a beauty in tattooing for that. Like I like that there's no resale value, you know, there's an emotional purity in that, but definitely like a bit of frustration where it's like, I want to do things that resonate further. So I then, launched a wine brand, called Saved Wines that did really well, you know, like it did really well. And, you know, like that was me just taking my emotional language and kind of like, you know, my sense of heart and storytelling and putting it into a physical product. And that the learning experiences through that really gave me the confidence to start a weed brand. And this was, you know, kind of before California had gone recreational. I partnered up with my buddy Clement. He's if you saw us standing next together to each other, it's very clear which hemisphere of the brain we each represent. I mean, I'm, you know, obviously the creative, emotional weirdo, and he's the steadfast, pragmatic Asian that people will actually loan money to. And to be honest, like it's the best partnership I've ever had. I've never had a working relationship that was so successful and so great as that, because he trusted me completely when it came to creative and really like supported me in my vision. And I completely trusted him on like a strategic financial level. I was like, I don't know, just tell me if we have gas in the tank, great, I'm good. But just you go, you know? And so we built this brand Beboe, which, you know, I mean, I've learned my lessons in, you know, other commercial collaborations that there's no worse feeling. You know, like I knew I was going to have to put this out there in the world publicly and speak about it. And there's no worse feeling than speaking about something that you don't actually care about. You know, it's horrible. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in a position where you had to like endorse something or like that you weren't really passionate about it, but it's the grossest feeling ever. So in starting this, I was like, okay, like if I'm going to do weed, it has to be, I was like, what's my most emotional connection with weed? And, you know, like, and I use weed a lot in my creative process, as a way of opening up. But, my mom, she was diagnosed with cancer when I was 8, and she fought it for, 7 years and ended up passing away when I was 15. But, you know, and on paper, I'll tell people the story and I was like, oh my God, that's so heavy. But when I think back on it, those years were like so bright and like fun. And, you know, there was such a levity in those years. And I think about it, and a lot of it's because my grandmother, my grandmother, when my mom was sick, she would always, every time my mom would go through chemo, grandma would bring brownies over. She'd bring a box of my brownies for us kids, and then a box of my mom's brownies. And
this is a beautiful story. I mean, it really is. And I was going to ask you, explain where the name Beboe came from, but it's a really beautiful story.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. Like, you got to keep it sincere. Like, lead with sincerity. Like, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. Yeah. And,
so can you please continue with the story about your
yeah. So like every time my mom went through chemo, my grandmother would bake her brownies and us brownies. And, you know, my sister and I, we'd mow through our brownies in like minutes, you know, like our box would be empty. And then we'd be like, where's mom's brownies? And, you know, she always kept them in her closet in this like padlock trunk. And they just become this like magical, like elusive treasure of like mom's brownies. Of course, later we found out that it's because mom's brownies were full of weed.
Right.
You know? Like,
right.
My grandmother would make my mom pot brownies while she was going through chemo. And, but like, and my grandmother's name was Beboe. So we named the brand Beboe after her. But it really was. I mean, like those years on which on paper should be so dark. You know, I remember drawing smiley faces on my mom's butt and then like, you know, sticking her meds, you know, injecting her meds into where the nose would be, you know, and I remember like sitting on the back porch, you know, when her hair would start to fall off, you know, we'd shave her head. And I remember gluing all her hair to a remote control car and like chasing my dog around with it, the house and like making them, it was just like, it was so much fun, you know, and it was never scary. I mean, I was really fortunate enough to like get to talk to my mom about death a lot and what death meant. And, you know, like she was really open in answering questions with us. And, you know, so that by the time she did pass away, it was sad. Like it was deeply sad, but it was never scary, you know? And yeah, like, you know, the day she passed away, she basically called my sister and I up to the hospital and sat us down on her bed and, you know, asked for our permission. She was like, I want to go. She was like, I'm tired and I'm hurting. And like, I need you guys to tell me that you're okay. And, you know, and we said goodbye that night. And then that was a Saturday. And I remember waking up Sunday morning and, you know, they came in to tell us that she had died. And, you know, it's like, we knew it was going to happen. But I went to school the next day. Like I went to school on Monday morning and I felt 10 feet taller than anyone in that school. You know what I mean? Like the perspective and kind of that gave me instantly, like I had no problems, you know, like everything that everyone else in high school was worried about or concerned about, like none of that fucking mattered anymore. And, you know, we're in a time when it's like, I mean, of course there's like waves of sadness, you know, and like to this day, like, you know, I miss her, but I really was fortunate to like grow from that experience so much instead of being handicapped by it.
Thank you for sharing that, man. That's really, really profound. And I know it will give other people strength and perspective.
Oh, for sure. If there's any parents out there with terminal
illnesses, that's actually going to be my next question.
Don't shelter your kids from it. Bring them in the room. You know what I mean? Like talk about it. Because it really, her death like empowered me and in a way, whereas like if you hide it from them and make it scary, like it really can handicap them. You know? And so, yeah, I mean, I've always, you know, like I hope that, you know, first of all, I hope I die before my kids. And second of all, I hope I get a chance to like really talk to them about it before that happens. Yeah.
Well, I often ask our guests, you know, knowing that everybody's struggling with something and a lot of folks listening to this may be going through a really tough time, to have that perspective from you and to see how you've gotten through it and come out on the other side is really inspiring and I think important. Yeah. Really, really important, especially because you're touching on a couple of issues that folks don't talk about, right? And they don't talk about how to talk about it with kids, which is really, really difficult.
Just talk to them like they understand. You know what I mean? Like make them understand everything. Don't water it down. Don't dilute it. There's so much more. Because I feel like experiencing death and loss of that magnitude, it's kind of like chicken pox. You know, like when you get it when you're young, you bounce back. You adapt to it. You build up some antibodies. You learn to live in a world with death. But if you don't get it until you're 40, it can put you in a wheelchair.
That's deep, man.
It's true.
If I've never heard that before, but that's really a bullseye. And that is really, really powerful. Thank you for sharing that too. And I want to go for a second back to Beboe because there's an important part of this that I want to
drugs.
No. I actually want to focus on something different. This alchemy that exists between you and Clement, right, is real. Yeah. Because I didn't know you, but the last time I felt as impressed when I had something in my hand was maybe when I had an iPod in my hand. There was for the first time, and I know where that was. It was in Afghanistan. It was in Iraq. I was in Iraq, and someone sent me an iPod. I remember the very first iPod I had. I was like, this thing blew my fucking mind. But there is an incredible beauty to what you've designed, and people, you know, you can Google it and check it out. And when you have it in your hand, and if you experience the product, this is not an endorsement. You know, this is part of why, because you got this magic of beautiful design. There's a rose gold color to it. There's your artistry in it, but the function. Right? Where this thing fucking works. And it's a really nice experience. And I think it does kind of help people understand a different side and frankly, a more glamorous side to cannabis. And maybe in the same way you have with tattoos, right? There was a time when like, you know, smoking weed was a dirty thing you did in a Coke can or in the back, and it was for criminals. And now we understand that it can help people deal with real severe pain and has incredibly powerful medicinal effects. I've been proud on this show to be an advocate for cannabis reform and for changes in policy and to highlight people who are really paving the way. But I think you are at a very forward edge of innovation in terms of function and art. And at this really exciting intersection. So I had to share that with you because I think it's important. And I think Beboe is already a tremendous success. It's probably going to be an even more mammoth success. And that'll be an incredible testament to you and a salute to your grandmother and to your mother. But it's also going to help people. Like it really, and inspire people. It's hard to do both. It's hard to be functional and inspiring, but you're doing that. And I think that's a through line in almost everything you've done in your work and your life, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. Again, I'm definitely sending that to my dad. But yeah, I mean, mentioning Clem, like it was, you know, having a supportive business partner is something that it's funny. Like I'll tell other artists and creatives about, you know, my relationship with him, and they're just like, "Fuck, I need one of those." You know, like I need somebody who just like, you know, just believes in me that hard. You know, that will like let me kind of sprinkle my magic sparkle sauce on it and just go. But yeah, it's been really exciting seeing it grow. You know,
what have you learned about, you know, you go into these different worlds, but right now, given this political context, given the president, what is it like for you as not just an artist, but as an entrepreneur? What's it like to be an entrepreneur in America right now at the level you're at?
I mean, I think it comes back to like, emotion has value, you know. I mean, I've like, you know, I'm now a part of this like crazy. I mean, you know, so like my company's publicly traded now, you know. Like I had to learn what stocks were, you know, and I'm like trying to understand how this all works. You know, I mean, I still like, you know, I'm the creative end, but I want to, you know, I sit in on all the meetings and it's crazy seeing the power of emotion and emotional connection. Whereas like, it's really, if you can emotionally connect with people, like that's currency, you know? And, you know, it's cause it's really like, you know, that's what like my product is. I mean, my product that's not true. Like it actually has like a chemical and biological function, but you know, what makes it different is that, okay, so there's, in working with a business, an operation the size of mine now, what I've learned is that there's kind of two ways to approach entrepreneurship. And one is kind of like you see a lot, and I'm going to speak on the weed side because, you know, that's what I know, but it actually applies to a lot of other avenues as well, is that, you know, like in the weed world, I see all this tech money coming into weed where they're like, and they brag about like their analytic abilities, where it's like, we can give you real-time feedback on what people are walking the dispensary and buying, like what website they're looking to, what, you know, like all this like real-time analytics. And I'm like, cool. So you can understand in real time what people are asking for. But then the other side of entrepreneurship, which I like to place myself into, is where I don't know, I don't do focus groups. I don't do market studies. I don't want to know anything about that. I want to make something for me. You know, like I'm going to design something selfishly, something that I want that isn't out there and might be a little over people's heads, but I'm going to have the confidence in people to like understand it, even though it's above what they're asking for. And so basically it's kind of like there's two approaches where do you accommodate existing demand, or do you go right ahead? Do you put out something that people aren't asking for and then teach them why it's better? And, you know, obviously like the easiest way is to give them what they're asking for. But the way you move culture is by giving them something that they have to learn in order to appreciate.
And where they trust you, right? And in the same way, the blind guy trusted you.
For sure.
In the same way, folks trust you when you take them down this journey and say, I know you want this tattoo, but I can show you something better.
Yeah.
That's what you've done here too. And that's been a through line. That's vision, Scott. And that's where you, I think, are moving culture and business and people's lives in a way that is ahead of the curve. When I first got a Beboe in my hand, the one thing that struck me too was that, it was called, I think, like the Hermes of cannabis products or something, but right, the Hermes of weed, right? And I said, wow, it feels like a luxury experience. It also feels more accessible to women. Right. Yeah. Which may not be the intent or maybe the intent, but there hasn't been traditionally, a jewel is very rugged looking, traditionally masculine. Right. And I don't want to get into gender stereotypes too much, but it felt smoother. Right. And it felt different. And I think that's a really important thing that I think you've been able to do in every aspect of your life is raise it up. Right. And add that creative, input and that special sauce, that magic. And that's really what it is, right? That I think you're able to. I think to do.
Yeah, with Beboe and we definitely we didn't. It wasn't designed for women, but it was designed I knew whatever I made had to be good enough for my wife. And I wanted something that she would use because I feel like she's definitely kind of the taste authority in my household, and I think most women are in most households. But yeah, when we went to market, it was very much an uphill battle. People were like, nobody wants this stuff, because our stuff, it's lower dosed. 5 years ago, you walk into a dispensary in California, everything was designed for how high can I get for $20?
Right.
It was just about what's the THC to dollar ratio, because that's all people were concerned with. And I was like, cool, that's not me. I'm a high functioning adult. I love using weed, but I can't get trapped on my sofa for 6 hours.
Right.
And so I wanted something that, was a milder dose, very controllable. Trust is hugely important. Our dosage is very metered so that you never get higher than you want to get. And also, presented in a way that looks nice, that looks
beautiful. It looks beautiful.
But I think it's that comes back to trust as well, where, I knew a lot of people were new to cannabis. There's especially now as it's opening up, there's a lot of first time users. So when you go into a dispensary, if you see something that's really beautiful and considered and thought out in the way it's presented, you look at it and you be like, I don't know much about weed, but I can see that whoever made this is proud of it, And so whatever,
you feel that.
Yeah, whatever level of consideration is put into the exterior, it's pretty safe to say they put that into whatever's inside as well.
That's why I thought the origin story of your grandmother and the name is so important in the way.
I'm not going to put anything.
No. And you're building what could be, and is already becoming a new iconic American brand. It will become that, I think. And I'm glad you got into the experience because we started talking about coffee.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of weed in the early days in cannabis products was coffee. You guys bought kind of green tea. Into the experience, and it was very, very different for someone who didn't want to be overly caffeinated.
The growth of cannabis is inextricable from the growth of the wellness movement in general. I think weed is very quickly becoming, is replacing alcohol in a lot of people's lives because it's a way to go out and unwind on a Friday night in a way that you wake up Saturday morning feeling better instead of worse.
100%. I am proof positive of that, especially as I've gotten older. I can't and don't drink like I used to. And I don't want to wake up feeling fucked up and hungover the next day when my 4-year-old's bouncing on my face telling me
your kid with a hangover
jokes.
Is the worst feeling in the world. Yeah. You just feel like such a dirtbag.
It really is. And I think for me, it's a moment of enlightenment in this country. Yeah. That maybe is coming at a time when we really need it, given our politics, given the stress in America. The last thing we need is everybody in America drinking right now, right? And granted, we drink on the show. I'm for those who are wondering, I'm actually having a Negroni right now. We'll have maybe a future episode where we bring in Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and me and you. We can all smoke up. But I really do think that it's important for us to think about what's going in our body and what we're experiencing and what's around us and what we value. at a time when the stakes are pretty high. So I want to go to another question I ask every single guest, Scott, and you've touched on it in many different ways. But Scott Campbell, what makes you happy?
Oh man, I mean, family is the most immediate answer. You know, like getting to, yeah. I mean, it's so many things. You know what I mean? Like it's like in the same way that seeing people, seeing people take advantage of other people's kindness, like, is infuriating to me. Seeing kindness win is everything. You know what I mean? Like seeing that, that like karmic retribution when you do something good and it all pays off and it all comes back around. I love that, I mean, and then, like kids, of course, I mean, these days, like I laugh harder than I've laughed in decades, just like hanging out with my kids. Cause it's, hanging out with a 4-year-old gives you permission to be 4 years old again. And like a lot of the anxiety of the shit you carry around and the shit you think matters just like falls off. And you're like, oh yeah. Like sometimes just like a plate of chicken nuggets and the sunset is everything.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. The world would be a lot better if we embraced our inner toddler.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
And I think you're so much of what you've said today, I think is going to resonate with people from so many different backgrounds on so many different issues. It's a really, I think, exciting time to be talking with you about. I'm glad we've gotten to get into so many different areas.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, I hope it doesn't feel too schizophrenic.
Not at all, man. No, it's a journey, and I think we've been on this journey together. The other thing I want to ask you, because we've talked about it in different ways, music is obviously a huge influence in me. It's an influence in this show. We've got some guests coming up that are going to come from the music world that I'm excited to share with people in the months to come. But talk about music and in particular, what are you listening to right now that's moving you or touching you? Or
oh man, yeah. I mean, music's been. I mean, like I've spent 22 years of my life in tattoo shops, so it's like there's a soundtrack to everything. It goes everything. I mean, I grew up in New Orleans, listening to a lot of like blues and jazz. Miles Davis and then went into teenage years, was just Slayer and Metallica, and then went into a bunch of punk rock. I was just like angry youth, just pushing against the walls around me, trying to, I think it's kind of like that's like the arc of maturity is like when you're young, everything's forced down your throat. So you define yourself by what you don't like. And then as you get a little bit older, you realize it's actually cooler to define yourself by things you do like, and at least that was my path. But yeah, so I was like, went through my angry punk rock phase, and then I don't know. And then these days, I mean, I got to say, this is going to be a really divisive kind of statement, but like, I just saw the Cardi B talking to like Bernie Sanders in the car on the way over here. And I fuck with Cardi B today. I really do. Like, she's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's awesome.
I have absolutely no problem with that. And I don't think anyone should have a problem. I mean, I was, when I was walking over to meet you, and I talked about this in the show recently, I have been listening to Taylor Swift nonstop.
Right.
And I used it in the show. I used the, you better calm down to talk about Trump, because I heard that song and I saw the video. I'm like, this is fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
And, you go through different points. If it's Cardi B or it's Taylor Swift.
Cardi B, she's, she was literally like stripping on a pole, like catering to fucking like rich assholes, like literally like taking her clothes off, and by selling emotion, you know what I mean? By like her emotional value and her words, like she's fucking crushing it right now.
Yeah.
And I like that she's using her emotional power for the forces of good. It's really. Like,
is there I have friends who are surgeons. One of my best friends is a surgeon. Is there a playlist or a genre or an artist you listen to when you're tattooing?
It's so schizophrenic when I'm tattooing. No, I generally, when I'm tattooing, I'll let the client decide, because it's kind of their comfort is more, kind of important than mine. And I also like enjoy getting exposed to new things. So I usually ask the client to put on their playlist when they come in so that I can learn something too. And it helps me better connect with them.
That's excellent, man. Well, I am so grateful that you shared so much time with me. And if folks hear noises behind us, those are cars, because we're at the Car Club, which is a place that is
and
also
they look as cool as they sound.
The cars look cool, and if you're listening for the first time and you want to see what this place looks like, go to angryamericans.us. We will have video of this interview with Scott, and you get to look inside the Car Club, and you will also be able to see this part of the show, which is the ceremonial giving of the gifts.
Oh,
now,
man.
I did not prepare you for this, but as is tradition on the show, we have some gifts for you, and I will start with the easiest, which is some Angry American swag, some merch. Okay, which I think you'll appreciate, is made by veterans, made in the USA. It's hard to do, and you can absolutely criticize the design, but hopefully,
no, I love it. I would never criticize it without sending you T-shirt designs
anytime. If you ever want to do a limited edition Scott Campbell shirt, we will be all over it. And the function piece too. Mizzen in Maine has now given us shirts for everybody because they're super comfortable. And I went with just straight white because you're kind of a basic guy.
I'm pretty,
I figured that might be good. Now, next, it's late morning, but as also tradition, I have a special gift for every guest that I am inspired by. And I want you to open this.
I would have used bigger words if I knew you were going to like.
No, man. This is. So for folks that are new, every guest I pick an American whiskey, and I go to a very liquor store in Lower Manhattan, the same one. This dude's getting sick of me at this point, but I'm probably keeping him in business. But I pick a whiskey that inspires me, and I'm like, what the fuck do I get for Scott Campbell? Like, how do I get it? And I had to pick something beautiful.
This is amazing.
And so this is Blanton's. It's made in America, but it's got this beautiful... I'll hold the mic for you. This is why it's great for audio, because you can hear the wrapping paper. And it's Blanton's. It's got this beautiful horse on top and this lovely bag that I hope you will enjoy.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Beautiful.
You're welcome. And now in total opposite, but also functioning on design, because we're not done with the gift, Scott. As is also tradition on the show, we started the show around Easter.
I just wanted to say I'm definitely not giving him a bunch of weed in New York because that's illegal here. So I'm definitely not giving you any weed.
Well, Chris Cuomo was on recently, and I hope his brother Andrew Cuomo will join us so we can tackle that, because
I'm not going to give you any weed.
Absolutely not. But we want to get Cuomo's brother, Andrew Cuomo, on this show so we can talk about it, because New York's probably likely to go recreational in the next year or so. Yeah. And that movement is important.
No, they're pushing hard. The genie's out of the bottle. Like, it's on its way.
I mean, and it's also become, I made this argument about veterans for many years, that it's not a charity, it's an investment, and the companies and the cities and the states that understand that will be better off economically, be better off politically, be better off socially.
No, I think
the same is true for cannabis. Like, get with the program or get left behind, right?
To be honest, like, the only resistance there is for legalization of cannabis at this point is pharmaceuticals and privatized prisons, which in my opinion are like the two most evil industries there are. You know what I mean? Like, if you're charging people to save their own life, overcharging people, or if you're benefiting from people being in jail, fuck off. Like,
I mean, there's a lot of parallels that we've talked about today, but like the evolution of, the punk rocker as the bad guy to becoming the good guy is kind of, a parallel to the evolution of cannabis in America.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right. And now, in the same way hip hop or punk music, went from this renegade, dastardly bad thing to now being massive industries that change culture and inspire people and make a shitload of money. Yeah. Is kind of like, it's kind of the American way.
No.
Right. Like,
the earth.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. And speaking of the meek, the last piece is we started around Easter. So I ask every guest, these are peeps. I'm going to hold your mic for you here, right? We'll teamwork here.
Right.
So these are peeps.
Yeah.
And there are three colors.
Right.
Traditional peeps. We have yellow, blue, and pink. And the question is, Scott Campbell, which color would you pick and why?
I would go yellow. And that's just my own personal nostalgia. Blue, I mean, in psychology class, they always teach you that, like, in nature, blue is toxic. So we have an inherent hesitation to eat anything blue.
Which is why, like, you'll never see blue in a fast food.
Exactly. Yeah,
company's
that's
logo.
why McDonald's is red and yellow,
Exactly,
and
red.
there's no blue because, like, many restaurants don't have blue because it's associated with.
If you're listening and you didn't know that, we're dropping some knowledge on you today. But blue. Okay, so no on the blue peeps. And then we come down. Now Scott has got them before his face, and he's looking at pink or yellow.
I mean, I know there's a big movement with pink these days where, you know, it's like real men, you know, like aren't afraid of pink. And I'm not afraid of pink. But I just, like, the last time I ate a peep, I was 12 years old and it was yellow. And if I eat a peep, it's to connect with that 12-year-old. So I'm going with yellow.
I love that. I will tell you that is a popular answer. Sarah Jessica Parker called the yellow peeps the OG of peeps.
Yeah.
And you are a guy who's about the classics.
Yeah.
And it's inspired all of your work. And you dude, are a true American success story, a real inspiration, a classic, you know, Renaissance man. And I've been so thankful to you for spending so much time with us on this show today, and for all that you're doing, man. If folks have never heard of you before or didn't know your work, you know, Scott Campbell is the kind of person that I think is helped shape America's past. You're shaping America's present, and you're going to shape America's future. And I'm really just grateful that you came in here and chopped it up with me, man.
Oh man, thank you for having me. Honestly, like, it's so important that anyone with a voice uses it for good reason, and I really admire everything you're doing and everything you're saying with the audience you have. It's great.
Right back at you. All right, we're not going to go smoke or drink any peeps now. Definitely. We're going to go do push-ups and share pictures of our kids. But ladies and gentlemen, Scott Campbell live from the Classic Car Club in Manhattan. Thanks for joining us.